Hey guys, welcome to another video. This is Garv and today we are looking at SQL questions for FAANG companies. Again, within FAANG you have Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google. So we'll try to look at different SQL questions and try to resolve these problems. Now maybe if you don't really know much about SQL, you can definitely check out this video where we kind of like look at, it's kind of like a crash course for you. So if you already know a good amount of stuff about SQL, you're definitely good to go ahead. But if you do want kind of like a refresher or kind of like a crash course, you can definitely check out this video where we kind of like looked at starting from even from a theory point of view, moving towards what are joins and actually looking at different functions. So do check that video out. It will maybe give you a good understanding to start with. And then obviously in this video, we will look at how to solve these problems. Now again, maybe it's a different way I approach a problem and you might have a different way to approach these problems. So please go ahead and do whatever way you want to approach this. But what I want to kind of like show in this video is how do I actually look at a SQL problem and how do I try to resolve this. So I've listed out these 5 problems that I found in Google, which are kind of like questions coming out of the FAANG companies. If you do like this kind of content, leave it on the comment box below or maybe even like the video because that kind of like gives me understanding of what you kind of want to watch. If you're going for an interview in these companies or if you're trying to get a job in data science field, I'll try to bring out more interview questions and try to resolve them here. It would not just be for SQL, maybe for Python or for R, or also looking at some data science math questions and how to actually solve these problems. And thanks guys for subscribing to the channel and supporting this channel. I really appreciate it. And currently I'm working on a lot of different projects and I do upload videos every week. So do subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on any of the videos, and I'll do my best to bring out the quality content to you guys. So without wasting any more time, let's start coding. So let's start looking at the questions. So the first question is from Facebook. So let's read the question out first. Assume you are given the below tables on users and user post. Write a query to get the distribution of the number of posts per user. So first we're going to go back to the editor and I'm actually going to look at the tables first, what exactly the data that is present in both of these tables. So as you can see within the question, we do have 2 tables, one which is users, one which is post. Now if you see within the question is about write a query to get the distribution of number of posts per user. Now again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to count the number of posts that is there per user. To be honest, if I really want to do this, I can actually do it within the same table. Let's just say for an example, the post table, because in post table I do have the user IDs as well. So say for an example, if I can actually count the number of posts that is there by user, I can actually do it through this table. But what I want to show an example is, say for example, if we had more information within this table, maybe like a user name and or a user type, and that information was in the user table. So I'll still show this example and I'll try to resolve it by creating the join still, just to make sure that how to do it if I was actually trying to create that join as well. So for this, what I'm actually going to do now is I'm actually going to open my editor. First of all, I'm actually going to look at these tables. So like start from users. Once I run this, as you can see within the user table, I do have my user ID and I have date. And then if I look at this second table, which is select start from post, that has values as post ID, which is the primary ID of this table. And then I have user ID, which is obviously the foreign ID. So with using this ID, I can actually join the user table. And then I have a body of the post and then I have date of the post as well. I don't really need the user table, but to kind of make it really easy, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you the join between user and the post table as well. Say for an example, if there was some other sort of like the column which was there in user table saying something like user type, which I wanted to use in this, I can actually do it this way. So I do need a join between these 2 tables, but for this example, we don't really need it because we have all the information available within one table, which is the post table. So what I want to do first of all is I'm actually going to join these 2 tables together. So I don't really need this select start from. I'm actually going to go back till here and say something like inner join, and within this I'm actually going to bring this back here. So what I'm doing is select star from users, inner join with post. And to be honest, I'm actually going to give the reference. So whenever you are creating a join, if you have seen in my other video, what you have to do is you have to give an alias here. So I'm actually going to say USR for user, and similarly for post, PST. and I can do something like on, because I'm gonna have to create this join. So I can, and as you can see, usually whenever you're using some editor that already has the tables in it, so it is giving me an option to select usr.userid with post, which is exactly what I want. I can just do that. So this creates my join. And what I want to do now is, if I look at my user table, I'm actually going to say within that user table is usr.userid. So that's basically my user IDs, because I want to count my, so if I go back to the question again, just to really clarify this, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to write a query to get the distribution of number of posts by user. So that's why I'm taking my user ID. I can actually obviously take that user ID from post table as well. But in this case, we are showing an example with doing the inner join as well. So user.user ID, and then for counting, I would say something like count distinct. Now I'm just doing distinct just to make sure that there might be two similar IDs for the post ID, but I just want to make sure I'm counting the distinct post. So distinct post ID. So this will count my, I'm actually going to name that column as total post. So I have these two columns, which is user ID and total post. Now, because I do have user ID in this, and I am basically using aggregate function, which is count, so I do need to actually use it with group function, which is a group by statement. So which usually goes on the end of your code, group by. Now, as you can see within this, my count is happening on a post ID. Other than that, I only have one option within this code, which is user ID. So I'm actually going to, which is what exactly we need as well. We need to see the distribution of post by user IDs, because that's by user. So I'm actually going to say something like group by user ID. For that, I have to first say the actual alias, which is usr.user ID. Now, as you can see, if I actually try to run this code, I can easily see by user ID how many people have posted, and I can see that again. So obviously in this table, we only have each user has posted one time. So I'm actually looking at their ID, and I'm actually looking at the total posts. Now, if there was some other value within this table, maybe something like an user type or something like that within this table, we could have used this to actually, rather than saying usr.user ID, I could have said usr.user type and use that against counting this post. So let's move on to next question. Next question is from Amazon. So if I read out the question, so question is, assume you are given the below table on purchases from users. Write a query to get the number of people that purchase at least one product on multiple days. Okay, so we have the table, which is purchases, and within that we have purchase ID, user ID, product ID, quantity, price, and purchase time. So first of all, we need to find some sort of like a purchase frequency, like how many people are buying a product over multiple days, and that count user should be against the purchase frequency, like people who are actually buying the product on multiple days. So to solve this question first, let's look at what's exactly there within the table itself. So what I'm actually going to do for that is select star, which means select all the columns, and I'm actually going to do it for purchases, which is the table name, if I have spelled it right. Yes. Okay. So as you can see within the table itself, we have the purchase ID, we have user ID, we have product ID, quantity, price, and purchase time. Just to kind of like go back again on the question, just so we are clear. So what we're trying to do within this question is we are trying to basically write a query to get the number of people. So we want obviously total number of people, not really anything else, that purchase at least one product on multiple days. So if you kind of like try to split this question into two parts. First of all, obviously we have to count the number of people, but the first thing that we need in this is people have bought product multiple days. So we need to first of all find out how we're going to calculate this. So first of all, what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to give an alias P, and then within this, I'm actually going to do something like P.user_ID. I'm bringing user ID because I want to count user ID. Then secondly, what I need is I want to count, and we are counting distinct purchase ID. Well, I'm doing distinct because I just want to make sure that the purchase ID is not duplicated. It's not, we are not referring to the same purchase twice. So I just want to make sure, and I'm doing distinct for that. So I'm actually going to say count distinct purchase ID. And as we have seen in the first question as well, that whenever you use aggregate function, which is such as in this, we are using count, we have to use group clause, just so we are count, because again, we do have another column within the select statement, which is user ID. So we have to count against that. So we will be saying something like group by p dot user ID. Once I run this, as you can see, we have user ID, and then we also have this, again, we can actually also name that, which is as purchase frequency. And if I run that again, that will just create that column name, which is purchase frequency. Again, what we can also do is within this, we only want to show the number of people who have actually bought more products than one product. One way of doing that is if we just want to get only one number. So the easiest way to do this is we can say something like, we can actually put this into one subquery first of all, and say something like select star from, and to be honest, we can actually do count instead of doing all of the columns, count star. And also what I can actually do is give an alias to this subquery, and then we can say where f dot, and I'm actually doing something like is purchase frequency, which is again the column I created here, and I can say is greater than 1, which means then we are looking at all the information which has more than one purchase. And if I just run this code, that should give me that 21 users in this table have bought products multiple times. But also sometimes if their question is more advanced and they're trying to ask you that, okay, so if they have bought multiple times, can you actually tell me if they have bought the products multiple times, how many of them have bought the product 2 times, or how many of them have bought the product 3 times or 4 times? Because that will give you sort of like more detailed explanation of how many people are buying on a really high rate in comparison to people who are just buying it twice. So you can also do that, how we are going to do this. Instead of doing the where clause here, what I want to do then is I'm actually just going to leave it as select f dot user ID. And then secondly, I'm actually going to also bring in my frequency column, which is f dot purchase frequency. So I do have these 2 columns. Even if I just do select star again, that will be the same values that we've seen before, the ID and then the purchase frequency. And then within this, what I'm actually going to do is take the alias off, to be honest. If I take them away, and I can just run the command, which is pivot command. So this pivot is exactly similar to what you do in Excel. So what I'm going to do now is start new brackets and say something like count user ID. So what am I counting this for? I can actually just go back down and say something like 4. I want to count this again. So again, that will be my second variable, which is here. So I'm actually going to select this and say purchase frequency in. And then within that, I can actually just select options like if it is 1 time, I just want to say 1. If it is twice, I can just say 2. If it is 3 times, I can just say 3. Now this is again, I'm giving it manually, but you can also have a list instead of doing it manually. You can actually pass on the list variable, the whole column names that you want to put it into this pivot. And once I do that, I'm actually going to just close the final bracket here. So after then, what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to close this bracket. And to be honest, like I don't really even have to kind of like mention the user ID or purchase frequency like that. I can even just say select star from, which means select anything that's there within the subquery itself. And then once I do that and I'm pivoting it, let's run this code. So as you can see, once I run the code, and as I have mentioned the column names myself manually, it kind of like shows me that 46 users have bought the product only 1 time, 12 users have bought the product 2 times, and similarly 9 users have bought the product 3 times. So that's kind of like explains in more detail if you're trying to select pivot it out what you can actually do in Excel. You can actually do this in SQL itself as well. So let's move on to the next question. Okay, so as you can see, the next question is from Facebook again, which is assume you have the below tables on user actions. Write a query to get the active user retention by month. Now again, Majority of the time, if you are actually going, this is maybe more just a common thought, if you're actually going for an interview, say for an example within any tech company, or even within, say for an example, if you're going for some other company as well, it's always good to do a bit of your own homework for these kind of questions. So say for an example, if I'm going for a company where I do think that these terms would be good to know, say for an example, what is the retention definition and how do you calculate retention, what is the formula for that, or what is churn, how do you calculate churn rate, or how do you calculate renewal rate, maybe acquisition rate, which means like looking at different KPIs or different metrics that that company would be using, which is kind of like they want to see that type of domain expertise, or to see like that you do understand these basic terms. Again, it is quite similar even if you're calculating, say for an example, retention rate on YouTube. So say for an example, if that's a graph which you have your x-axis and y-axis, and 10 users starts watching at the video at the same time and people start dropping off on, because again in your x-axis you have your time, so throughout the time people start dropping off. So that's your kind of like a retention curve in terms of how many people make it to the end of the video, which is again to see the retention of rate. So if 10 users started watching the video, 5 made it to the middle of the video, that means your 50% retention rate in the half of the video. And say for example, if only 2.5 people made it to the end, so you have sort of like a 25% retention rate to the end of the video. So similarly within this, when we're talking about Facebook, you'll be looking at retention of the active users, comparing within this period, which is again on a monthly basis. So we'll be looking at this month compared to the previous month. So you'll be doing something like number of users who are active within this month divided by the users who were there in the previous period, which is the previous month, and multiply by 100, which again gives you your retention rate of users month on month basis. So let's start looking at the code itself. So let's jump back to the editor, and I'm actually going to look at what data is there in that table. So select start from user actions. Okay, so as you can see, we have 3 columns, which again we talked about in the question, which is user ID, event ID, and timestamp. So I want to first of all, say for an example, because I'm calculating it by month, but if you look at my information here in the table, it's actually on a date level. So I do want to convert that into a month-year level as well. So say that would be first thing. And then I don't want to kind of like take duplicate actions. So say for example, this user has sign in, comment, like. So what I need to do is to make it easier, I can just take sign in values, which means I'm actually looking at how many users signed in on this month and compare that with how many users signed in on the previous month to calculate my retention on this month. So let's actually get our months first of all. So user actions, I'm actually going to say something like, just going to give an alias to this table, which is UA, and then I'm actually going to say UA.star, which means the same thing, that give me all the values in the column. And then I'm actually going to first of all get the information converted into a month year format. So for this, I'm actually going to use something like 2char. And in this case, I'm actually going to use my column, which is timestamp column, to convert that into this format, which is YYYY. And then once I do that, I'm actually going to name this column as month year. Okay, so once I do that, I can actually execute that code again and look at the information. So as you can see, what I'm actually done here is, which is looking at the date, and I've converted that date into this value, which is month year, as it gives me the start of the month and the year value. So it will help me in terms of calculating the retention rate within the code. I don't have to bring this information out. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do more is, first of all, I want to only select the values for sign in. So I'm actually going to say something like where class. So where, and the column name is UA dot, that's event ID, is equal to sign in. And if I just look at the format, yeah, sign in. So once I do that, that will only give me the values of sign in, which means when customers are actually logging in to Facebook. So to finish that fully, what I'm actually going to do is, because in the question itself, what I have to do, if I go back to the question, it's basically write a query to get an active user retention by month. So obviously the value of the output would be on a month level. So I don't really have to see on a user level. So let's bring it to a month level first of all. So what I'm going to do next is put this into a subquery and then basically give it as A, so I can actually use my variable. So in this case, I'm actually going to do is select A dot month year. And then what I'm actually going to do is count distinct. And within this, I'm actually going to count my user ID. So I'm just counting the number of users that are there within that month. So I'm using the aggregate function against month year. So I do have to have a group clause in it. So I'm going to say group by. And I'm actually going to say a.month year. So if I just execute this code, it should give me something like this, yeah, which is exactly what I'm looking for, month and the count of users. So okay, I can actually bring this data out as well, because if I bring this data out, I can obviously calculate on the calculator what is the actual retention rate by month. But what I want to do in this is to actually calculate the retention rate within the same table. If I'm actually calculating a retention rate for the month 2, I do want the information of month 1 beside it, because that would be my actual number of users on the previous month. So I can actually use that and basically calculate my retention rate. So I'm actually going to try to do that first. So basically, it's always good to have that idea clear what you're trying to achieve. Once you know exactly that you want this information in this format, you can easily try to achieve that. So let's try to do that. So what I'm actually going to do first of all is I'm actually going to take the exact snippet and I'm going to paste that on the bottom. Now, why I'm doing this, because I do want to kind of like have the same logic again, because the way it is counting, it's perfect. But only thing I need is I want to count it for, say for example, if I'm calculating it for the month 2, I do want the information for within this to be for month 1. So the idea behind this, again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the information on the same row level so I can calculate the retention rate beside it. So ideally what I want to see is if I'm actually, because obviously if I'm doing it in this way, I do need my joining keys, because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create 2 output of the tables and basically do an inner join between those 2 to have them within the same row. So let's basically try to break it down one by one. I'm actually going to show you the output and then I'll apply that. So as you can see within this, what I'm actually doing is the exact same code. And what I want to do next is to actually bring the previous month as well. So I'm actually going to copy this again and say something like this. And what this will be is previous. Now, as you can see, this is my previous month here. So in the case of previous month here, what I do want to have is, like if you look at my actual information, it's exact same. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to apply a function on this timestamp before converting into a month year format. So the function would be add months. And I'm actually going to add 1 month to it. And I'm actually going to show you why I'm doing this. So once I do that, I can actually execute just this part of the code just to see my output. Oops. Oh, there has to be an underscore. Sorry, made a mistake there. So once I just run this part of the code. Okay, so as you can see within this part of the code, what I have done now is, so if you see for these, like the example here, so my month was actually 1, which again in the first case, but I had just added 1 more month to that. So my previous month is basically 2. Now, why I'm doing this? Because I'm trying to create that joining key with which I can join it into a first table. So I'll show you an example of this. So once I run the whole thing again, and in this case, I'm actually going to run it by previous month here. So as you can see, I haven't made really any changes into the code. I've just copy pasted another part of the code, which is the exact same as the other code, but I've only added 1 more column into that, which is again for my previous month year column, in which I have added 1 month to my code to basically bring it as that this will be my joining key. So once I actually show you the output of this, so I can just even execute this part of my code. Okay, so as you can see, now this is the exact same code. I'm actually going to just pin this and run the previous one again. Okay, so as you can see, I haven't really made much of a change, but I can actually show you what I'm trying to do. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is our months. And exactly within the different format, we have exact same, but we have just added 1 to the month. every time. Why I have done that? So if you see, like, these are now my two different tables, and when I want to kind of like calculate the retention rate for, say for an example, month 2, and if I actually join, because I do need a joining key to join these two tables together now. So if I join on this column here, which is 02 to 2019, with the previous month result, so as you can see, which is again added on this one. So if I would have brought, so just to kind of clarify this, I'm actually going to bring month year as well, so it is really clear to you what I'm trying to do here. So I'm actually going to just say month year here, and I'm actually going to also say group by month year. As you can see, like they're the exact same months. So for an example, if I'm sorting them out, so as you can see, this column is going to become my joining key, because if I look at the output back again from the code itself, so say for an example, when I'm trying to calculate the retention rate for the month 2, if I look at this and go back to my code that I created here for previous month, so you can see the month 1 is there, but I have created another joining key, which is again month 2, which means I've added on 1 month into my month here, so I can actually use this column then as a joining key into the other table, because once I join this is actually the value for the month 1, but I have created this joining key which will help me to join these two tables now together, which will give me this number 30, which is again the count distinct user IDs, which will give me the user IDs for the previous session, which again I can use as the previous month values in my formula. So what I'm going to do next is, as you can see in this case here, I have my month 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Obviously, I can't calculate the retention rate for the month 1 because we don't really have any value from previous month for that. So the values will, once I join them, it will be for 2, 3, and 4. So let's try to join these two tables. As you can see, they are separate code right now. So what I'm actually going to do is, first of all, I'm actually going to name these values. So I'm going to count this and say it as these are total users. And for this one, I'm actually going to say this is previous total users. So once I do that, previous total users and total users, now I want to join these two codes together. So I'm going to basically put this into brackets because that's my first code. And for example, I'm just going to give an alias of AA onto that. And similarly, I'm actually going to put this into a subquery as well. Now, to be honest, I don't really need month here in this, so I'm actually going to just take this out. This is just to kind of show you as an example what I'm trying to do. Once I take this out, I'm actually going to leave it as BB for this. So these are my two different subqueries, which I want to join together now. So I'm actually going to say something like select AA dot, or actually I can leave it as just star for the moment. And I can do something like here, inner join. And I'm actually going to inner join on this BB, and the idea is to join them on AA dot month here is equal to BB dot previous month year. So once I join on these two, I should be able to see them side by side. So what I'm actually going to do is, don't think so I've made any mistake. I do see, yeah, I haven't really put from here. So once I do that, select star from to this query, inner join with the next query. Oh, sorry, I have actually forgot to put simple on here because I'm joining it on month here and previous month here. Once I run this code, as you can see within this, now I do have these side by side. So as you can see, I have my month here, which is obviously the current month here, which is 2, 3, and 4. And as you can see, the value for that is total users are 30 in this month, 13 in this month, and 8 in this month. So obviously you can see that users are leaving the platform in month-on-month basis. And then in the previous, so basically this is my joining key that I created in the other subquery. Okay, so once I run that, as you can see now, everything is on one row level. So once I actually sort this as well. So as you can see, within the 2, 3, and 4 is my actual months because I have created this joining key. So as you can see, the previous total users values, because again, this was the value for the month 2 and this was the value for the month 1, but I haven't brought the actual month year column in this case from my second subquery. So as you can see, I did create this as my joining key. So I was able to actually connect these two tables together, and I was able to use the actual total number of users for this month and also the total number of users which was there from the previous month. So I can actually calculate my retention month-on-month basis on the row level. So once I have done that, now actually we are going to calculate the actual retention rate. So for this, I'm actually going to actually describe all the values that I'm actually want to bring it into this. So which will be AA dot, So I want to see my month here. Then secondly, I do want to see my, so in this case, I'm actually going to use AA.total users. And I will be bringing as well, which is bb.previous total users. So once I do that, now I can actually calculate my retention on this. So the formula that we looked at in the first place, we are going to apply that formula now in SQL, so which will be AA.total users divided by bb.previous total users. So once I do that, I can then basically multiply this by 100. And I'm actually going to name this as, and I'm actually going to put this into a bracket as well. Because I think once we multiply this, I should be able to see the values in the floating points, but I don't want to see that in floating points. So I'm actually going to say something like round it, which is a round function, which actually rounds the values. And I'm actually going to name this column as retention rate from, and that's my start of my subquery, which is starting from this point, inner join with the next query. Okay, so once I've done that, I'm actually going to try to run this code now. So perfect, so everything works fine. So as you can see, I'm actually going to sort this first of all. So as we looked at in the first place, so on the month second, we had 30 users. And the previous session, which was the session 1, which was the month 1, we had 30 users as well. So our retention rate is 100% because 100% of the people who logged in the first month also logged in the second month. Similarly, when we looked at the month 2, the retention rate dropped because we had 13 users who logged in, which was again in the previous month 2, it was 30 users. So our retention rate for that month is 43%. Similarly, if you looked at the month 4, comparison to previous month, we had 13 users logged in. This month we have 8 users logged in. That means our retention rate is 62%. Now again, it depends on the type of formula you're using. Again, as we discussed a couple of times in this video about retention rate, which is again more related to a YouTube videos, or if you're calculating retention on a different logic. Again, it depends on what domain you're coming from, what type of retention you're trying to calculate. If you're trying to calculate something like retention over the period of time from a starting point. So say for an example, you will use the exact same formula, but rather than using the previous month, you would use your opening base for where you started the counting that as the period of the calculation. So say for an example, if I was calculating the retention for a YouTube video, so I would be calculating in terms of taking my opening base, which is the amount of users who started watching the video, towards calculating it on each basis where, okay, so 30% of the users dropped in the first half of the video, and then you have 30% of users which made it to the last of the video. So exactly same way you can actually use this formula to calculate your retention rate.